Warning: this episode contains some strong language. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to Tales from the Trunk, reading the stories that did make it. I'm Hilary B. Bisniaks. Listeners, I'm beyond thrilled to have back on the show the author of the Kingston cycle, of the Midnight Bargain, and now of Even Though I Knew the End, World Fantasy Award-winning author C.L. Polk. C, welcome back to the show.
Hi, hello, hi, yes, I am here.
I'm so thrilled to have you back on the show. Cannot express. I really, 2021 was a year, as was 2020, and I just couldn't get you on here for the Midnight Bargain, but what a book to be returning for a somewhat belated but well-deserved book tour. Before we get into the reading, is there anything that folks should know about Even Though I Knew the End before we start? Which I just said those words again.
Okay, so Even Though I Knew the End is a novella, and that basically means that you're going to have an immersive experience for about the space of an afternoon, and then you're going to be done. It's going to basically pick you up, hug you, and let you go. I kind of think that that's an advantage right now. I simply cannot face epic tomes at this point. And I've been reading a lot of novellas, and I have a real appreciation for the fact that you can get in it, and it's the books are so absorbing and neat and so tidy and so easy to finish. I get this hit of dopamine. It's I read a whole book, yay!
They are the perfect thing for my autistic burnout right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I could talk too much about this book, really. It's, like I said, it's a novella, and the process that I used to create it is a little bit different from everything else. Maybe we can talk about that in a bit. But what I really loved was kind of the exercise in the writing voice, the author, the narrator's voice is so much fun. And so I want to read some of it to you if I can.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to read Act 1, Scene 3. It was so late by then, I was sure I'd missed out. I hurried to the wing on the edge of the near north side. I walked into a dim saloon that smelled of spilled beer and kept on through to the back, as if I were headed for the poker den that ran 7 nights a week. But before anyone could spot me, I cut left into an alcove that held a model closet and another door. I knocked the right rhythm, not shaving a haircut that close. I stood still as the peephole opened and a light flashed in my eyes. The wall opened, and Sylvia let me onto the landing before a long flight of stairs leading down into the earth. Evening, beautiful. You're late. I shook her hand in greeting, leaving a quarter in her palm. I should have brought flowers. How's Moira? She smiled with pride. Moira's got her suit on tonight, playing horn up at WGN. Good gig. Tell her hi, gorgeous, will you? She'll be here later, and you can tell her yourself. She glanced at the bulge under my left arm. Check your iron? Will do. I passed under the light of a pendant lamp to creak my way down the stairs into a damp creosote-smelling tunnel. I was late, but Edith was still here. Sylvia would have read me the riot act otherwise. Distant music echoed down the hallway, and I stopped at the coat check to smile at the new girl behind the counter. Her hair is shiny with brilliantine, her second-hand black tux outfit just a touch too big. She held out her hands for my coat and hat. She packed up my persuader in a locker without batting an eyelash and gave me a chit. I didn't bother taking off the holster. I feel strange without it.
Hmm.
I turned to meet the gentle press of fingertips on my shoulder, my flight or fight kicking up before I could put my smile back on. Just a cigarette, gal, silly. Who else would it be? You need cigarettes, Helen? Mitzi, though that wasn't really her name, flicked ringed fingers over the tray. I took the nickel and kissed her rouged cheek. You look gorgeous, doll. She fluttered her hands and shooed me away. Go break some other girl's heart, you wicked broad. I grinned and swept open the beaded curtain to the wink. Chicago had loved us once, and the Straights had packed into the Deluxe Cafe and the old 1230 Club to come scandalously close to the queer. The cops cracked down on the pansy clubs in 1935, and these days, Chicago didn't love our kind at all. Somebody found this place at the end of the Great War and the beginning of the Great Experiment and put a bar in. After Prohibition and gallons of blood washing up the gutters of Chicago, this place draped itself in dust and waited for Betty Donahue and her wife Willie to discover it themselves. They had established the passwords 2 Halloweens ago, and we all planned to take its secret to our graves. The wink was long and narrow, its chipped brick walls lined with cozy horseshoe booths. Real crystal chandeliers, mismatched, bless every one of them, glittered through a fog of cigarette smoke. They hung down the center of the room, leading the way past the long, well-stocked bar to a round-edged stage where Miss Francine swayed in a glittering blue gown and sang, I've got you under my skin. The room was full of women. Don't let the double-breasted suits and slick-back hair fool you. The wink was a haven of women gathered in clumps or cuddled around a special companion, whether they wore starch collar skirts or satin and sequins. The Friday night women of the wink could make free, drinking and laughing, eyeing each other the way they'd never dare on the street. I wound through the standing crowd, headed for my usual place at the end of the bar. A highball sat fizzing next to my empty chair, and beside it sat Edith Jarosky, listening to the songbird up on the stage. She'd waited for me. I glanced at my wristwatch. 45 minutes, and she'd waited. She had her pinstripe jacket on, the shoulders sharp-angled and fashionable. Her scarf hung neatly on the back of her chair. She had one last sip of bourbon in her glass. That's how close I cut it. Her neck was bare, the hair lopped off in a tumble of curls so artful I longed to mess it up. Edith. I stopped just to look at her in profile, at the way she picked up her heavy-bottomed glass and looked in on her last sip, the one she'd lingered over, waiting for me. But I stayed where I was, and wanted this moment to see her, to fill my memories with her, to feel how it ached so sweet and bitter in my chest to see her one more time before I had to button all that up and put on a smile. She turned her head and looked right at me. Smile. Smile. But as I gazed at her and she at me, something fluttered in the shadow of her face. My heart jumped. In my mind, a metal door slammed shut. Smile. Smile. Edith beckoned to me and I came, helpless as a fish on the hook, but glad, so glad to be caught. She put her hand on the polished bar top, and I laid mine over hers, twining our fingers together. I love you, Edith. I love you so much. I thought it until it echoed inside my ears. You're late. I'm sorry, baby. 45 more minutes I could have had with her. I've been chasing this mess of a job. I didn't need the $50. I had enough put away. It'd keep Edith for a little while. I wish I had more. She leaned over and let me taste the bourbon on her lips. You smell like pictures. You get a job? A consultation. Yeah? Her eyes were bright, excited. Object or people? It's too hot, baby. I'm turning it down. I tossed bourbon and Coke over my tonsils, leaving an empty glass next to hers. The bourbon sat warm and fuzzy in my middle as I slid off the seats. Ain't this our song? Ada smiled at me through her sand brown curls. You say that about all the love songs. That's because they're ours. Come on, dance with me. She let me pull her to the tiny patch of floor in front of the stage. I blew Miss Francine a kiss she caught in her hand without missing a note. and then I folded into Edith's arms. We danced the first night we met when Edith was still stumbling to lead, but she wanted to dance the next night we met. And every night we spent at the wink after that. She eased me into an inside turn and I came back to her arms, easy as breathing. I have something to tell you. Edith brimmed up with news as I spilled forth in a grin that showed her gums. There's an opening at Kingston. The station manager called me. Edith's life was a series of call signs and station identifiers I could hardly keep straight, but I knew that one. All the way from San Francisco? Her smile sparkled brighter than chandeliers. Just like we wanted. If I take the job, it'll start in a month. A month. Oh, but it hurt. I wanted to go west years before, but there wasn't enough money. Edith had a good job at WMAQ as a sound engineer. She was the only woman sound engineer in the whole state, and she wouldn't move away to take a lesser job as a switchboard operator or a coffee-fetching typist, and I'd never ask her to. San Francisco was the stuff of dreams, but we stayed in Chicago where we could afford the rent. But now the stars aligned. Now she could go.
Ooh. Oh, that scene gives me so many feelings again. And again, it... Oh, what a book. What a book. So, I know that this, as we discussed a little bit before we went on air, as it were, I know that this book had a little bit of an unconventional start, but, you know, this is a bit of an unconventional show, so I'm wondering, are there any bits that you absolutely adored out of this book that just didn't make it to the physical copy that you can go and purchase from fine bookstores everywhere?
Well, okay, so I mean, the thing about this book, I don't know, it was weird, right? Because um, when I got the hankering to write this thing, I had this picture, um, and I was like looking at the picture, and I was like, I want to write a story with like these two characters dressed like this. Like, I just want to do like a 40s detective agency sort of idea. And I was like, well, that's a neat idea. But I kept thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it. But I wasn't thinking about the plot so much as I was thinking about, like, well, I would want to set it here and I want it to be like this and I would want this and I would, when I just kind of like ran down everything that I kind of wanted, like all in my head. And then I was like, okay, let's outline as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when I say let's outline as much as I can, I grab a stack of index cards and I just write down like the scenes that are in my head that are like the most powerfully there.
Mm-hmm.
And they aren't nearly enough to like outline the whole book. Not nearly enough. But what happened was is I had so many scenes, I just kind of wrote them down and I knew like the sequence of order that they had to come in. And the next thing I know, I was writing scenes to fill in the information that went like in between the cards I already had. And the next
Mm-hmm.
thing I knew, I had 26 index cards, 27 index cards, and they were every single scene in the story, every single one laid out perfectly, like a beat by beat. It's the most detailed outline I have ever done.
I love this
And
for you.
it was so great. And so, like, I had this collection of scenes. And so, what I did was, I was like, well, I obviously know the story. I got to get to work, right? So, I just started like burning through the cards one
Mm-hmm.
after the other. I wrote it in an incredibly short period of time, but I was obsessed. So, I worked on it for many hours. So, I
Mm-hmm.
wrote it in 9 days, but I was like working on it for 6 hours every day, trying to get it done. And like every time I hit something where I was like, wait, what is the answer to this research question? I would stop and I would go find out the answer. And I was so set on the story that I would find
Mm-hmm.
out the answer and I would come back and write it immediately. I didn't rabbit hole like at
Wow.
all. I know. I know. So weird. I was so driven to get this whole story out. And so what I ended up with was this voicey, incredibly tight and like weirdly like in the moment meticulously researched like down to the last detail kind of a
Mm-hmm.
story. Like um there's a scene where Helen and Edith are in a diner and it's Sunday night and there's a Red Wings game on the radio. There was a
Mm-hmm.
Red Wings game on the radio. That was the game. I found a newspaper article that had the play by play. I knew minute by minute what was happening in the game. So when the people in the kitchen yelled scores, it was at exactly the time that the Red Wings scored their second goal against the Black. Like it
Oh, I
was just
love this for you.
and so like everywhere there was like I had to stop and research something every few pages or so.
Mm-hmm.
But like it was like magical, right? Because it was like I need the answer for this, and I would find it. It was so great. Like I couldn't do it now, like,
Mm-hmm.
but and so then I wrote it, and then I was like, exhausted because I'd finished this story and I knew it was really good, and I couldn't wait to show it to people because here is the secret that we haven't been talking about for
Mm-hmm.
like since the book came out. This was originally a supernatural fanfic. Helen was Dean, Ted was Sam, and well, it wasn't Castiel, it was Jimmy Novak. But like it's a little bit complicated. You have to actually read the story in order to figure it out. But if you know Supernatural, you will know exactly what I am talking about when you read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, and I put it on AO3, and I expected, like, it was stupid of me to expect this, but I had expected after like previous fanfics that I had written that what was going to
Mm-hmm.
happen was is that everybody was going to jump on it, and that I was going to get the usual like, oh yeah, I read this was really great, blah blah blah, like don't be a dumbass, don't go in there, that sort of thing, like the comment on every single entry kind of thing. And what happened was is it sank like a stone because it
Oh,
was written in first person, like a stone. Like a few people did read it and they really, really liked it. But I got a lot of, why did you write this in first person? As soon as I saw that it was first person, I backed out immediately. I don't want to read, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, it's the, it's hard boiled detective fiction.
yeah.
It's
That's what it
supposed to be written
is.
in
That's
first
how it
person.
do.
That's the point. That's the literary it doesn't matter. I don't want to read first person. Ew, yuck. And I
Uh,
was like, I hate everything. Why has this happened to me? This is the best thing I have ever written, and nobody will read it because the narrator talks about themselves in the first person.
mm-hmm.
Oh my God. And so, like, I was so bummed out. I took it down.
Oh.
And so it was literally sitting in a trunk for years until it was like, hey, do you have anything I can publish? I'm like, the only thing I have, and this is absolutely ridiculous. And I said what it was. I was like, do you think you can scrape the serial numbers off of it? I'm like, well, I can try, right? And then I thought, okay, well, this is good enough, right? Like there's a certain amount of this that is just going to have to be the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it was okay because Supernatural is like the war in heaven apocryphal Bible fan fiction anyway. So,
Mm-hmm. Like, knowing
so I just
this,
kind of let it be the
it
way it
makes so
was.
much sense. And it also, like, every single twist and turn just, like, had me alternately, like, gasping, wanting to bother my partner about it, and knowing, like, she hasn't read this. She won't, like, I can't spoil this. Or
Right?
laughing out loud, just, like, maniacal laughing my head off. It just,
Yay!
and I also 100% feel you on the, like, having written a fanfic that, like, I wrote a fanfic this year, probably, I think, one of my best works ever, and it is in such a small fandom that, like, it has views, it has kudos, it has the best ratio of views to kudos I've gotten on anything, but the fandom is like 8 people. And that's
Oh my
just what it
God.
is.
So yeah, I mean, sometimes you just write a fanfic and it's like, this is for me and my 9 goblin friends.
Yeah.
And like, I do it a lot. I did it a lot. I did it for the magicians. I like wrote magicians fanfic, and it was like, this is for me and my friends in this one Discord server. I just want
Mm-hmm.
to amuse them, and so I was writing this thing. And like,
That's
I don't really think it got any like notice outside of like me and my 9 goblin friends in the Discord, but it was super enjoyable to read.
yeah. That honestly, that's the best fanfic to write. Is the one where you're just writing it for 9 specific people who are going to cackle at you being on your behavior because it's also
Right?
them on their behavior.
Oh yeah. I just like there was a scene actually late in the thing because it wound up exploding into like this whole novel where I posted it and people came back to me and they were like, Quentin Coldwater as a Disney princess, did you really do that? I was like, yes, yes, I did. All of the animals in the forest came to see what the hell he was up to.
Oh, that's beautiful. Um.
Oh, so
Oh.
great.
So there is. I feel like this is such a hard book to talk about in a lot of ways without spoiling things. But
Right.
do you have a favorite piece? And I know also, this was a supernatural fanfic that went up on AO3, bombed, and got taken down. Do you have any bits that you just adore out of this uh, that made it in that you really want people to get to, but that aren't spoilers?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Let me just, I'm just going to open it to a random page and see if it's correct. Um, okay. So, like, all right. I've just found this bit. One of the things that's going on with this novella is that, like, there's a thing that happened in the backstory 10
Mm-hmm.
years before. Um, and that, like, there's, like, I have to refer back to it a couple of times, but there is a moment where I talk about that moment 10 years ago that basically made it so that this story had to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a line. I just have to find it. I'm just going to keep pattering as I try to figure out where the heck it is. Because I think it's in Act Two. I think it might be in Act Two. No, 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 no. It is late in Act One. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, once upon a time, I crawled out of the ruin of an overturned car and didn't stop until I lay gasping on my back in the middle of an icy Ohio crossroads. Huge flakes of snow hit my face as I called out to the devil, desperate to bring my family back, desperate enough to give anything. I called to the devil, and the devil came to me. It's just this image,
Oh.
right? Like you can see it, right? Like Kim Manners is right there. It's like, okay, now
Mm-hmm.
get up on the crane so the camera is way up high on this dirt road somewhere in Langley,
Yeah.
right? Trail of like this trail of blood across the snowy road from this like turned over old timey car, and there's
Mm-hmm.
like Helen like laying in the middle of the crossroads on her back. She doesn't have any spell components, nothing. All she has is desperation and need. And the snow is falling on her face as she calls to the devil. And it's just like, ah, it just,
Oh,
oh, it makes me all jiggly.
it's so good. I remember vividly reading that and like feeling that scene, seeing that scene. So good. So good.
I think this is probably like my most kind of cinematic book.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that I kind of go through it and the way that I'm like narrating it and like, going into scenes and stuff. I'm trying really, really hard to like build this almost like this shot by shot film in other people's heads. Like I know precisely what I want them to hallucinate, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
working very hard to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, my opinion, you carried it off. Like, this is...
Yay!
I, I will say, like, I am a sucker, hardcore, since birth pretty much, for film noir, for the noir detective genre, in no small part because of growing up on Guy Noir, Private Eye, on Prairie Home Companion. But, like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're gonna get somebody into noir, like, there are way worse ways. I did
It's true.
adore, I think it's even on the first page, the callback to Phillip Marlowe. Because
Yeah,
you can't not.
I couldn't not. It's like basically the whole thing was that I was like, okay, Raymond Chandler, hold my gin and watch this.
Uh, and the the moment, listeners, you're just going to have to read this book to get to it because I'm not going to spoil it, but the moment where the title comes through
Oh, my
in the
title drop. Yeah.
prose fucking broke me. It was
Oh no.
incredible.
Oh
I had to put the book down and stare at the wall for a minute after
no.
that
Oh
moment.
no. Oh my goodness. But like
Just
I just the thing is that's that particular part that you're talking about, that was one of those moments where I was like typing as quickly as I can, and I can't type very fast. I'm kind of clumsy, right? But I was typing as fast as I can because the words were just like they were
mm-hmm.
right there. Like I do not think like there's like an entire page there that has not changed except for the names, like one little bit, and that was like basically it. Like there was something about that. And when I hit that line that became the title drop, I was like, I stopped, went to the top of the thing, took out the code name, and put that in as the title. Like
Oh,
that was it.
love that. Love that for you. So we have been talking this episode. Listeners, you're going to be hearing this in February, but this is a 2022 release. By far my favorite novella of 2022. Do you want to take a moment to tell our listeners who maybe, they've seen your name around probably, but maybe they haven't read either the Kingston Cycle or the Midnight Bargain before, and just give them an elevator pitch on both of those, that series and that standalone.
Okay, so the Kingston Cycle is a trilogy, and it basically goes like this. Um, a dying man begs the physician who tried to save him to solve his murder, and then a monarchy falls.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's
like
good
that's
labor politics in it.
yeah, and that's like basically it. Is like I like wrote this story about a regime change, but like most of it was like basically it was like one guy who was like born to power and privilege who went, you know what, fuck this, and like left, like just ducked out, like literally faked his death
Mm-hmm.
so that he could go and like train his magical ability, which he has to keep a secret, so that he could be a physician, and like all the thanks he got for that. And that like it starts out like page 2, there's a medical emergency. Page 4, the dude is dying, and he's like, solve my murder. And
Yeah.
the protagonist is like, yes, I will, I promise. And then a government falls as a result.
Yeah.
Um,
What a string of dominoes. Just
yeah,
incredible.
it really is the domino meme.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like that's the Kingston Cycle. If you've ever seen the books in the bookstore, like right next to him, one is blue, one is purple, one is pink. This is not an accident.
This is not an
Um,
accident.
this is not an accident. This is like 3 different ways you can have a bisexual romantic relationship. And those are not all of the ways that you can have a bisexual romantic relationship. It's just 3 of them. And like, I don't know, I just like it. Like every book switches protagonists, but the whole trilogy is basically the story about the capital of Eland, Kingston, and about like its government and its system and about how it changes.
Adore the series.
There's so much. Like everybody talks about the bicycle chase in book 1. Okay, so there's a bicycle chase in book 1. In book 2, we have a protagonist who basically has to be like trapped in a corner and like basically given food. It's like, you cannot move from this spot until you eat this kind of stuff. Like just basically a very busy person. The second book's thing is that I pulled off there was only one bed trope in a mansion with many, many bedrooms. Just because that's what I wanted to do. I also pulled off the woman in a tuxedo at the royal ball.
Boy, did you.
Like, I don't know, it's fun. It's fun. There's a call out tribute and an I love you to an American Werewolf in London, and when you see it, you'll know. And then Soul Star is the last book. Basically, Soul Star, the last book is about the woman who gets things done and avoids the credit, suddenly being like cornered into leading a political movement, not being the secretary assistant of the person leading the political movement, has to actually lead the political movement. And she isn't all the way comfortable with that, but she's got to do it anyway because nobody else will.
Robin gets shit done.
Yeah, all 3 of the books have murder mysteries in them. All 3 of the books have like light romance plots in them. All 3 of the books are mad at capitalism, and that's like the Kingston cycle. The Midnight Bargain is a novel that I wrote basically big hair, big dresses, spirit summoning, reproductive rights. That's the Midnight Bargain. Basically, I kind of like, I knew I wanted to write a story about a young woman who didn't want the life that she was supposed to want, which was basically be pretty, go to like the equivalent of the marriage season and go find like the best husband achivo she can get. She didn't want to do that. She wanted to be a magician. So she was kind of like Hermie and Rudolph Red-Nosed Reindeer. She wanted to be a dentist. And so I knew I wanted that, but I was just kind of like, there's an ingredient missing. I don't know what I need, but because I want this, like, I didn't want to do these things. I want to be a magician. And I'm like, okay, but like, why can't she be like, what's the problem? Why can't she just be like, no, I'm just going to go do this. I'm going to run away and join the circus, the magic circus, as it were. And like, I didn't know for a while. And then like terrible laws were enacted in 3 states in 2 days that basically like technically made Roe versus Wade like not even a thing in those states anymore. And I was absolutely furious. And the rest of the book just dropped in my head at that point. I knew why she couldn't just go be a magician. And the thing is that like the thing that infuriates me about the Midnight Bargain the very, very most is that I had to come up with and actually like, okay, I see your point, reason for why women couldn't have reproductive control over their own bodies. I had to come up with a reason that actually made sense, and it just makes me so angry. I overheard somebody telling somebody else, please read The Midnight Bargain because the Supreme Court doesn't want you to. Basically it's like I wanted to write a book with like ornate middle to late 18th century fashion and big hair, that whole like Baroque, freaking Rococo style kind of thing. But I
Mm-hmm.
also wanted to write a book about all of the historical romances that I love so much. About, we're going to go to the London season and we're going to go to Almack's and we're going to go to this dance and we're going to go to these house parties and we're going to have hijinks and we're going to get married kind of thing. Like I also wanted to write that. So, and I also wanted to write about a magical system where what made you a magician is not your ability with magic, but your ability to do a very specific thing, which was
Mm-hmm.
to summon spirits to do things for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted that whole kind of a thing where it was like I want to summon a spirit who does the thing for me. And then as I was writing it, I wound up kind of developing this thing where I was like, well, what does the spirit get out of the deal? And so I was like, okay, so spirits were never people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have bodies. They exist in a plane where they're basically like floating in a void of nothing. And that like they don't really like they become kind of minimally conscious
Mm-hmm.
until somebody calls them. And then they remember that there is a world out there, a world of sensation and experience that they desperately want. And that spirits, they want to be in a body. They want to be a body. They want to eat. They want to dance. They want to get drunk. They want to have sex. They want to do all of the things that we just do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that like my point of inspiration for this was a book that I loved and then hated. And it was this absolutely screwed up many generations saga book that Anne Rice wrote in the 80s called The Witching Hour. And the thing
Mm-hmm.
is like it's deeply twisted gothic, it's screwed up, there's like inbreeding in the whole thing. But I love this book until I got to like the last 50 pages. And then I was so angry. I was so angry because I just didn't feel like it wasn't it made me mad. So I basically what I needed to do was I needed a spirit who was like that's their deal, that's what they want. But instead of it being like this big mysterious, we don't know why this spirit blah blah blah, I wanted it right out there. Spirits want bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They want earthly, material, fleshly experiences, and they will do just about anything to get it. And so I wind up in the situation where I have a protagonist who is like basically allowing a spirit to ride shotgun in her body
Mm-hmm.
in order to do the magic, which is not the way that other people do it usually.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not usually what happens. But she's like basically is like, get in, loser, we're going conjuring. and and like Nadi is a simple person. Nadi wants to have a good time, and Nadi wants to hex anybody who gets into Beatrice's way, because
Mm-hmm.
getting into Beatrice's way is getting into Nadi's way.
Love
And
it.
so it just, I don't know, it's not quite what you would expect. I have this thing that I do where I write these stories where, there's a lot of like cozy, lighthearted, fun kind of thing. But if you look at it, you're like, wait a minute, this is actually horrific. What do
Ah.
you what do you mean?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, love those books. Love those books. Um, while we're talking about things that we love, real quick before we go, have there been any books, other media, games, anything that you've been consuming lately that you are just dying to tell people about?
Okay,
Surprise!
so I gotta say, all right. So there was this old video game that I loved in 1994 called Masters of Magic, and there's a reissue,
Mm-hmm.
and I am so excited. I'm so happy. I know it's already out, but I have to wait until Christmas. And so like I'm like anticipating doing that. I'm also like a huge Dragon Age fan, so I'm like waiting for
Mm-hmm.
Dreadwolf every time somebody mentions something about new Dreadwolf news. I'm like, oh no, I need to know what's happening. So of course I am slowly watching the Netflix series. I've only watched like the first two episodes because it's like two episodes a week with a couple of my friends for doing watch-alongs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I watched the first two episodes, and I'm like, oh no, what's gonna happen? And I'm like very happy about that. I like am reading The Spare Man by Mary Robinette Kowal. And I wanted to read it because it's kind of got that same feel of that like mid-century
Mm-hmm.
detective story kind of thing, except it's a very different kind of thing than Even Though I Knew the End, because of course it's happening on the USS Lindgren, which is a spaceship that is headed to Mars. But it's not really a spaceship so much as it is a giant cruise ship in space.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very different. It's like this very gracious kind of mid-century cocktail hour kind of thing. Um, a little bit of that silver screen that I have going on, even though I knew the end, but where mine is very shadowed. This is very much like drama
Mm-hmm.
slash like a little bit more lighthearted, except um, the protagonist, Tesla Crane, was in an accident in the backstory, and it has left her physically disabled. She has
Mm-hmm.
chronic pain. She has mobility issues and all of these other things, but she has a scientific doodad in her head that is a deep brain stimulator that helps her deal with the pain. And here's the thing, she can dial it all the way so that she can't feel anything and suffer all of the consequences of that happening. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so one of the things that I noticed, and I really, really, really like, I wasn't thinking about it until I was almost all the way through the book, and I realized I was like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Tesla does this thing, and it's bothering the shit out of me. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the reason why is because I do it too. And it's that she spends so much time and so much energy on not appearing to be disabled to other people, not because she doesn't like she's trying to deny that she's disabled, but she is trying to not intrude on other people's experiences of her with
Mm-hmm.
it. She's trying to hold it back because she knows that she has to. She can't actually show it. It's like I can't like when I'm having a major panic attack, I can't say to people, it's like I am having a major panic attack. I have to go, right? I have
Mm-hmm.
to cushion them from the reality of my disability. And Tessa Crane spends so much time cushioning other people. And I just want her to just not do that,
Uh-huh.
or at least not do it as much as she does it. I want her to be able to say, I am having a bad pain day. I have to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone accepts that she's having a bad pain day and she has to go. But Tesla Crane, for all that she's in the future, is living in an ableist society. And when I figured it out, I was so mad. I was so mad. So yeah, I am thinking about that. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It is if folks have not read any of the Astronaut from Mars books, I think that The Spare Man is a great jumping on point because,
Mm-hmm.
like, the first three books in the series are basically like the first two books you have to read as a set. The third book you could read as a standalone. I personally
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't, but like this one
Yeah.
does not depend on the lady astronaut in the way that the others do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure it's the same universe. Like, it's the same kind of retro future SF thing that I think is
Mm-hmm.
super cool. And stuff. So it's definitely got that style. So if you read The Calculating Stars and you haven't read The Fading Sky, I'm not going to shame you. And I'm not even going to say that I'm disappointed. I realize that there are so many good books out there and it
Mm-hmm.
is impossible to get them all. because we don't have time bubbles where we can read books.
Which is frankly ableist and rude.
Right? It really is ableist and rude. But like the Spearman is like it's so neat. Like
It's so cool.
You should read it. And if you haven't actually read any of the Lady Astronaut series, go ahead and read the Spearman. Like it stands out there on its own. And it's a good time. And when you get to the part where you find out why/how Tesla wound up with a chronic pain condition, don't drive, don't operate heavy machinery, don't do anything where you have to be able to see because you will cry. Okay, I'm done now. Go buy the book.
Buy this book.
It will make you cry.
Oh. On that note, see, it's been so good having you back on the show. Where can our listeners find you elsewhere on the internet?
I used to have a really good pat response for this, and now it's ruined.
It's fucking Elon Musk.
Stupid person. Why did he do that? What a dumbass. I have absolutely no idea how this part of the podcast is going to read in February, but we're going to find out.
We're going to find out.
As of today, I would say that the best thing that you can do is go to my website, which is clpolk.com, and see my books. You can figure out what the heck I'm doing. There are links so that you can find out what else I'm doing. I am currently talking to people on the internet on Mastodon. I am on the server Wandering Shop.
Hell yeah.
At clpolk at wandering.shop. That's where I am on Mastodon. And like that's pretty much the place you need to talk to me if you want me to talk back. Like I am a very indifferent Instagram user. I am the worst TikToker in the entire world. And so yeah, that's where I am. Because I used to be at the other place, the Blue Bird place, but now I'm like, no, I have walked away. I'm not going there anymore. Somebody has to fix it before I come back. Nobody's gonna fix it.
We're recording this in mid to late December. The elongated muskrat just did some things over the weekend. I have no idea what anything is going to look like tomorrow, let alone in February.
Day. It's sort of like, well, this place is a train wreck. I can't see how it would get any worse. And then the next day, well, this is a train wreck. I don't see how it can get like it's just as terrible. It's I would say it's like Groundhog Day, but it is something different every day.
Oh. Well, see, thank you from the nearby the bottom of my heart for coming on the show. It has been such a delight. Truly one of the best ways to round out season 4 of this podcast, which sounds absolutely tremendously fake.
Oh no, it's not fake at all. It totally happened. You did all of it.
I did all of it. Listeners, tune in again in 2 weeks when my very last guest of the season will be Amy Ogden.
Yay!
Woo! Tales from the Trunk is mixed and produced in beautiful Oakland, California. Our theme music is Paper Wings by Lillian Boyd. You can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/trunkcast. All patrons of the show now get a sticker and logo button, along with show outtakes and other content that can't be found anywhere else. Provided it still exists, you can find the show on Twitter at Trunkcast, and I tweet at HBBisnieks. You can also find me at HBBisnieks at wandering.shop. If you like the show, consider taking a moment to rate and review us on your preferred podcast platform. And remember, don't self-reject.